Welcome to episode 120 on your CySA Plus Prepcast. In this session, we focus on the people behind the process, specifically the stakeholders involved in vulnerability reporting. Effective vulnerability management depends not only on discovery and remediation, but on targeted, clear, and timely communication with the right stakeholders. From technical teams to executive leadership, each group plays a distinct role in understanding, responding to, and learning from vulnerability information. Identifying these stakeholders and understanding what information they need and when they need it is fundamental to driving remediation, promoting accountability, and aligning cybersecurity initiatives with business priorities. For example, readiness and professional execution. Knowing who must receive vulnerability reports is just as important as knowing how to write them. Cybersecurity analysts and Security Operations Center personnel are primary stakeholders in vulnerability reporting. These are the individuals typically responsible for discovering vulnerabilities using tools like scanners, monitoring systems, and threat intelligence feeds. Once vulnerabilities are detected, these teams conduct technical analysis to determine severity, exploitability, and potential impact. They are also responsible for drafting the initial findings that form the basis of downstream reporting. Effective reporting at this level includes detailed technical summaries, supporting evidence, and recommended remediation strategies. IT operations and infrastructure teams are direct consumers of vulnerability reports. These teams are responsible for implementing remediation tasks, such as applying patches, adjusting firewall settings, or reconfiguring servers and endpoints. They need highly specific information that maps vulnerabilities to affected systems, identifies the correct patches or configuration changes, and outlines remediation priorities. Providing these stakeholders with clear, actionable data ensures that fixes are applied accurately and that remediation timelines stay on track. Application developers and software engineering teams are vital stakeholders in cases where vulnerabilities exist within custom-built applications. These teams must be informed about coding flaws, insecure configurations, or misused libraries that could be exploited. Reports directed to developers should include reproducible findings, references to secure coding standards, and clear instructions for resolution. Engaging developers in the vulnerability lifecycle also supports long-term improvement in secure development practices, helping to prevent future vulnerabilities during the software development lifecycle. IT managers and departmental supervisors represent operational leadership within the technical domain. These stakeholders are tasked with coordinating the remediation workload across their teams, managing timelines, and ensuring that remediation tasks do not disrupt service delivery. Reports sent to these managers should balance technical detail with summaries of impact and urgency, including data on vulnerability aging, open issues by business unit, or expected remediation timeframes, helps them allocate resources effectively and maintain alignment with operational goals. Executive leadership, including chief information officers and senior executives, must also be considered key stakeholders. They do not need granular technical data, but they do need summaries that explain risk exposure, regulatory implications, business impact, and any resource requirements necessary to support remediation efforts. Presenting this information in a clear, strategic format enables executives to make informed decisions about prioritization, budget allocation, and policy enforcement. Well-drawn reports for this audience support stronger organizational commitment to cybersecurity objectives. Compliance officers and governance stakeholders require vulnerability reporting to track alignment with regulations such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, or GDPR. These reports must highlight whether specific vulnerabilities violate compliance standards, pose audit risks, or require disclosure to regulatory bodies. Compliance-focused stakeholders rely on vulnerability reporting not only to track technical findings, but also to manage evidence collection and ensure the organization remains within regulatory and contractual boundaries. Risk management teams are integral to contextualizing vulnerability data within the broader enterprise risk framework. These stakeholders use vulnerability reports to update risk registers, calculate potential business impact, and support prioritization strategies. For this group, vulnerability data must be translated into risk language, with metrics such as likelihood, potential financial impact, or business continuity implications. Providing this context helps drive executive decisions and ensures security efforts are aligned with organizational risk appetite. Internal audit teams and assurance functions monitor remediation effectiveness and validate that vulnerability management programs are functioning as intended. They review vulnerability reports to confirm that issues are being addressed according to policy and that documentation supports audit trails. Reporting for these stakeholders must include timestamps, ownership details, remediation status, and evidence of resolution. Providing thorough documentation enhances transparency and demonstrates accountability across the cybersecurity function. Legal departments are important stakeholders, particularly when vulnerabilities have legal, regulatory, or contractual consequences. Security teams must notify legal staff when vulnerabilities could lead to data breaches, noncompliance, or contractual violations. Reports provided to legal stakeholders should identify data types at risk, potential regulatory exposure, and whether disclosure to authorities is required. These stakeholders help determine whether notification laws apply and ensure that remediation steps are consistent with legal obligations and liability management. Public relations and communication teams represent the final internal stakeholder group. These individuals are responsible for shaping how the organization communicates about vulnerabilities to external audiences, including customers, media, and business partners. Reports shared with these teams should identify reputational risks, disclosure timelines, and potential public concerns. Coordination between cybersecurity and communications ensures that messaging is accurate, timely, and aligned with regulatory and business requirements. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are more security courses on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Security service providers, or MSSPs, are common external stakeholders in many organizations' vulnerability management efforts. When an MSSP is contracted to monitor, detect, or remediate vulnerabilities, they must receive accurate, timely, and detailed reports from the organization. These reports typically include vulnerability discovery dates, affected assets, proposed remediation actions, and any internal constraints or priorities. Because MSSPs often operate across multiple clients and time zones, clarity and completeness are critical. Regular, structured vulnerability reporting strengthens collaboration and ensures that outsourced remediation activities align with internal expectations. Vendors and suppliers are essential stakeholders whenever a reported vulnerability affects third-party products, platforms, or services used by the organization. This includes software providers, hardware manufacturers, cloud service vendors, and managed platforms. Promptly sharing vulnerability information with vendors is necessary to request patches, updates, or configuration guidance. Effective communication ensures vendor accountability and accelerates resolution. When vulnerability management teams fail to engage vendors promptly, remediation may stall due to lack of vendor support or required documentation. Regulatory agencies and oversight bodies represent formal external stakeholders in specific situations. If a vulnerability leads to a data breach or affects systems subject to mandatory reporting, organizations must submit formal notifications to regulators. These reports often have defined timelines and formatting requirements. In some cases, failure to report within a mandated window can result in fines or legal action. Engaging compliance teams and legal counsel early in the vulnerability reporting process ensures that notifications to regulators are accurate, complete, and timely. Business partners and joint venture participants are important stakeholders when vulnerabilities affect shared systems, integrated networks, or co-managed platforms. In such cases, one organization's vulnerability may expose another's data or systems. Reports must be carefully crafted to describe the scope of exposure, remediation timelines, and any required coordination activities. Clear communication promotes transparency and preserves trust between partners. Failure to report relevant vulnerabilities can damage collaborative relationships and lead to contractual disputes or reputational harm. Customers and end users must be informed when vulnerabilities impact their data, systems, or service experience. While internal teams may worry about alarming customers, transparency and timely communication are vital for maintaining trust. Customer-facing reports should be clear, concise, and non-technical, focusing on the nature of the risk, how the organization is responding, and what steps the customer should take. If any, communications may include emails, support site notices, or public statements, depending on the severity and scope of the issue. Law enforcement may need to be notified when vulnerabilities are associated with malicious exploitation, fraud, or potential criminal activity. Cybersecurity professionals must know when to escalate findings to law enforcement agencies, especially if evidence suggests active exploitation by external threat actors. Reports shared with law enforcement should include technical details, indicators of compromise, and any relevant timelines. Legal teams often support this process to ensure proper handling of evidence and alignment with investigative protocols. Industry-specific information sharing groups and security consortiums play a vital role in improving collective defense. When appropriate, organizations should share non-sensitive vulnerability data with these groups to promote broader awareness and response coordination. Reports shared in this context may omit proprietary information, but should include vulnerability type, affected platforms, observed exploits, and any mitigations applied. Sharing this data supports mutual defense and helps raise the industry's overall security posture. Cyber liability insurance providers are external stakeholders that need access to vulnerability reports in certain situations. If a discovered vulnerability results in an incident, the organization may submit a claim to cover response costs, legal fees, or operational losses. Insurers require documentation to evaluate the claim, assess policy coverage, and determine any changes to future premiums. Accurate and timely vulnerability reporting helps streamline the claims process and supports positive relationships with insurers. Board members and governance committees are increasingly involved in cybersecurity oversight. These high-level stakeholders require clear summaries of major vulnerabilities, including organizational exposure, strategic implications, and resource requirements for remediation. Reports to the board should avoid technical jargon and focus on business risk, compliance impact, and reputational consideration. Keeping board members informed ensures that cybersecurity risks are considered at the same level as financial, legal, and operational risks. Investors and shareholders, though not always involved in day-to-day operations, may also become stakeholders in vulnerability reporting. Particularly for public companies or organizations preparing for acquisition, material cybersecurity risks must be disclosed when they have the potential to affect valuation or market confidence. Vulnerability reports shared with this audience are typically high-level, vetted by legal and executive leadership, and focused on strategic impact. Transparency in these communications supports investor trust and aligns with evolving disclosure regulations. To summarize episode 121, identifying and engaging the right stakeholders is one of the most important elements in vulnerability management reporting. From technical teams and business leaders to external regulators and industry peers, each stakeholder requires tailored communication that supports timely decision-making, strategic remediation, and regulatory alignment. By mapping stakeholder roles to specific information needs, cybersecurity professionals ensure that vulnerability data results in action, not confusion. Effective stakeholder reporting enhances coordination, builds trust, and supports the broader goal of reducing organizational risk through informed collaboration. Thanks for listening. To learn more about cybersecurity, please visit baremetalcyber.com. There you will find best-selling books, videos, and even more free cybersecurity training courses. Please subscribe to the Prepcast and our various podcasts. And thanks for listening.